Sirius XM NBA Radio's Mitch Lawrence. He also writes an NBA column for Forbes and the Sporting News, and he joins us now with a look. Well, we could have just skipped the whole season, Mitch. We didn't need October and November. We knew this was happening.
Yeah, especially the way the playoffs went, right? What a disaster for the league. And now we got a 6-day wait, so, it'll be worth it when we get there. But, man, the playoffs were such a disappointment, all those blowouts, guys getting injured left and right. But, yeah, you're right. We end up with the two teams we all knew we were going to get all along.
I think the playoffs were not great. That's for damn sure. But we got the series where everybody won it. But do you think it will be a good series? I mean,
I think it's going to be a great series. I think it'll go 7.
You do think so? It was. It was a
really
3-1 series last year. One team added Durant, the other team didn't.
True, but let's not forget here. Cleveland now knows how to win, and Kyrie Irving, besides LeBron, who except for Game 3, and I don't know what happened to him that night, whether he had a bug or he just didn't care. It looked very, very fishy what was happening, where he just didn't look engaged and he didn't have his usual fire. He obviously rebounded the next 2 games after that. But with LeBron playing at the level that we've seen him in, Kyrie Irving, who's unstoppable going to the basket, I don't know who's going to be closing the lane down for Golden State, and Kevin Love, and then they've remodeled that bench, and it's actually I think it's a better, deeper team than last year. I give Golden State a hell of a shot. Now, I know, yes, Kevin Durant has had some great moments here in these playoffs, and they've got Steph Curry. But even still, I don't think it's going to be a blowout at all. I know there are a lot of people think it'll go 5 games, maybe even a sweep. That would be unbelievable, and a record-setting feat for Golden State because, as you know, nobody's ever run the table in the postseason. Going 16-0 would be a first. But I got to think the way LeBron's playing now, guys, I'm not going to bet against him. I think he can win. They can win 3 games in this series, I would think.
Yeah, no, and I don't know that I'm well, yesterday I did say I think it was a 3-1 series. That series could have easily finished up and been a 5-game series last year. You asked Durant, exactly. You had Durant to that mix. And you mentioned some of the things that Cleveland has done, but is there pressure on this Warriors team? I mean, Durant going there.
Sure. Well, first of all, they don't have Bogut anymore. And when I talked about who's going to close down the lane, who's going to protect the rim, they depend on Kevin Durant a lot to do that. Now, they haven't played. Now, you have to go back and look at their playoff resume, which I write about in Forbes. Portland was a 41-win team. Utah's a team that got very lucky when Blake Griffin missed the last 4 games of that series. They won 7. They play San Antonio without Tony Parker. Then Kawhi gets hurt in the second half of the first game, so they have nobody to create shots. Now they've got to deal with LeBron James going to the basket, creating shots for others. Now they've got to go deal with Kyrie Irving, who's, as we know, he's basically unstoppable when you saw him against Boston. And Boston's a very good perimeter team defensively. I know Golden State's a top defensive team. I still think, though, that Cleveland's going to be able to score in this series. When you factor in adding a Kyle Korver, J.R. Smith can have his moments. You know what? This, to me, is a big, big deal for Golden State defensively. And, yeah, I mean, to me, the pressure's all. It's not like there's always pressure on LeBron because we measure him against Michael Jordan. We don't measure him against the other MVPs he's got to get through in the series. So that's a different type of pressure. But Kevin Durant left an Oklahoma City team with 5 minutes last year in Game 6 away from going to a finals. And, of course, he changed basically basketball history by going to Golden State and forming a super team. A lot of pressure's on Kevin Durant here. I would tend to say most of the pressure's on him.
Yeah, and, keep in mind, this Golden State team has won a championship. Sometimes we conveniently forget that they did win one without him, right? And, obviously LeBron, they got theirs last year. So they're kind of going into this thinking, we're underdog, right? So that's a scary proposition, I think. That is the one scary thing for Golden State, that the Cavs are being looked at as underdogs.
It's amazing. I read something today where LeBron has actually been an underdog in 6 of the 8 times he's been in the finals, which when you think about his stature, where he is all time, that's an amazing statistic in its own. But look, on the flip side, besides Kevin Durant, have you been blown away the way Steph Curry's played in these finals the last couple of years? He's been the MVP of the league the last 2 years, and he has not really played like an MVP in the finals, so he's got a lot of pressure on him. So there's a lot of stuff at work here. I think they're going to be great games. The thing I'm most happy about is that everybody looks like they're kind of healthy. I know Iguodala's got some back issues maybe, but everybody's healthy. I just wish that Golden State I mean, Cleveland could have run the table like Golden State has. That Game 3 bummed me out when they lost to Boston because I wanted to see two 12-0 teams.
Yeah.
But I think you're going to get the best out of everybody now.
Yeah, well, Mitch, I know last week we discussed it a little bit about Curry. That's why he's in my number 2 category. Those finals, those playoffs, sometimes we see a little slippage.
Yes, we do. Well, last year he had a knee, which he never really recovered from. They didn't use it as an excuse. I know there are people who are down on him. They say they don't want to hear it, but you saw that he couldn't break defenses down. He couldn't break the Cavs down the finals. The other thing about Curry is that he's a guy who, because of his slight stature, and he's, you get into him physically, as the Cavaliers will do, he tends to wear down. So you've got that factor going at it, in there too. We'll see what he does in these finals. I don't know. I mean, you know what? He's a kind of a weak link defensively, and Kyrie Irving will take advantage of that. But the one thing that Golden State did by bringing in Durant was, as you saw against San Antonio and a game against Utah, when Curry and Klay Thompson and Draymond Green aren't hitting their perimeter shots, Mike Brown's been very smart and adept at saying, okay, I'll get the ball to Kevin Durant. I'm going to get him to basically run the offense from the top. And you saw Kevin Durant have a couple of games where he was the best player on the court, and he basically outscored the other team 16 or 18-6 he did against Utah. He had a big moment against San Antonio, too. I want to see that from him in these finals. That would do him a world of good to have a couple of big stretch runs maybe in these finals. We're not just shooting, but he's the guy who can get you to the line late in games. That's the reason they got him, because Curry and Thompson don't have a history of that. Deep in playoff games, late in these, when you need it in crunch time, you need some scoring and the jump shots aren't falling. That's where Kevin Durant's ability to get to the rim and score is going to be huge.
Mitch Lawrence with us, Sirius XM Satellite Radio, NBA writer for Forbes.com. And, Mitch, I want to get into that article you have on Forbes right now, specifically about LeBron James, because superstar athletes, it's always interesting to me where some of their motivation comes from. And here's a deal in this season where LeBron James finished 4th in the MVP voting. Is that something that bothers LeBron James? It can be used as a motivating factor?
Well, it bothered him greatly to finish 3rd last year. He was, he was behind Curry, who he really had no problems with, although he still feels like he should be the face of the league and not Curry. But also he was, more miffed that it was a Kawhi Leonard thing. He figures he's just a better player than Kawhi Leonard. So that was last year, and this year he's finished behind Westbrook and Harden and Kawhi Leonard. So, yeah, when he was walking out of the Game 2 against Boston and the Cleveland writers were there and they asked him about it, he was incredulous. Of course, he gave him one statement. So, that motivates him. That always, whether it's Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant or LeBron James or any of the all-time players, even if they perceive a slight against them, they'll use that. This was not perceived. This is genuine. It's just amazing to me, guys, that LeBron James, Kevin Durant, and Steph Curry are probably the best players in the game, and nobody finished in the top 3 in the MVP. We all know the reasons why, obviously, but that still is an amazing fact this year.
So the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Golden State Warriors, the ordained matchup, you think it'll go 7 games. Who are some of the guys that, obviously if LeBron and Kyrie Irving and, you've got Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, they're going to get all the headlines. Who are some of these bit players that you think can make an impact on that series?
Well, Iguodala always has, his moments, and he plays LeBron pretty well, so you have to keep your eye on him. We still haven't had a breakout game shooting-wise from Klay Thompson. Can he give you one? That I don't know. JaVale McGee is a guy you have to keep your eye on. He puts pressure on the other team because he gets to the rim easily. He'll also maybe be called upon to play a little bit of defense. And then on Cleveland, they've done a great job fitting Kyle Korver in. When they're successful, guys, they are a team that has a lot of firepower. And, in these playoffs, you've seen it with the Spurs. If you don't have a team that can stay with Golden State, then you're going to lose. You have to be able to defend them, but you got to be able to score because they're going to score on you. And Cleveland at their best bombs in threes. Kevin Love does a great job. We all know of that. But I think a guy like Kyle Korver could have a big moment in these finals. We'll see. We'll see how he responds to the pressure. But they're battle tested. Both teams, it's great. They've got all these players have championship DNA. So I think it sets up as a great, great series.
Mitch, you write about the Warriors and their 12-0 run so far and trying to go unbeaten through the playoffs. But how about their coach, Steve Kerr? They have won 10 games without him, but this is this isn't Portland, right? This isn't Utah.
No.
This is Cleveland.
Right. It's not the Spurs without Kawhi Leonard. I mean, look, there are people out there who will think that, LeBron's got Mike Brown solved and he knows Mike Brown inside and out and he's going to be able to think ahead of what Mike Brown's going to do. I don't buy that. Mike Brown has two tremendous players in Curry and in Durant. They're playing at a high level. He's got all the makings of, this is a championship team, which Mike Brown, he coached LeBron before. He didn't have a championship team. He coached Kobe before. That was a disaster in L.A. So it's a much different deal here for Mike Brown. I just want to see if if they finally really face some adversity like they did in Game 1 of the Spurs when they had to come back. And luckily for them, Kawhi Leonard was out because that turned it into a non-competitive series. But if they happen to lose Game 1 here, what's that going to be like, the pressure on Mike Brown to make the adjustments for Game 2? Of course, Steve Kerr's going to be there. Steve Kerr is basically with the team. He's always around at shoot-arounds. He's at practices. He's helping, putting them through their paces. The only big difference is he's not on the bench, so you're not going to get the adjustments that Steve Kerr could make on the fly with Mike Brown, and you're not going to get – sometimes he relates very well to players in the stress and the heat of battle, and we'll have to see how Mike Brown does with that. That's the thing. I think, guys, the real fascinating thing is when will the Warriors get some real adversity, and how will Mike Brown and the guys respond then?
Mitch Lawrence with us here. Don't forget, check out his piece at Forbes on this NBA Finals and LeBron facing two former MVPs in this series, Curry, Durant, and obviously that's the high profile. But I want to talk about the coaches. We were talking about this the other day. Like, if you're Steve Kerr, and let's just say, he wanted to go and try to get more money or a raise, his leverage is gone, and we just want to, I was thinking about how important coaching is with these two teams.
Oh, I think it's very important. I think it's a mistake if you think that these guys can just win on their own. Steve Kerr is very important to this Golden State team. He relates so well to players. He has a real command of the locker room. He has the respect. When he walks in a room, he's the one in charge. Not saying that Mike Brown doesn't, but you know what? He was there when they won their first title in 2015. He was there, obviously, last year, too, when they blew a 3-1 lead, which is a historic comeback on the flip side. Now, Ty Lue's an interesting character because he makes a lot of crazy statements. He's obviously, the one that always I laugh about is how the job is so difficult. He's got LeBron in his corner. LeBron is his guy. LeBron is his biggest advocate, so he's doing fine. And then this week, of course, he came out earlier and said that the Celtics are tougher to defend than Golden State. I don't know what he had in mind with that, if he's trying to poke the bear, why he would go there, but he is I think we all laugh and we joke that LeBron is the coach of the team, but obviously Ty Lue knows what he has to get done in this series. He knows, and I'm sure LeBron has a lot of input. I mean, LeBron is the coach on the floor. You see it during games. It's not a big secret when it's on TV. LeBron is there. He's in command in a lot of ways, but it's not like Ty Lue's along for the ride. I think he plays a very important role, too.
Oh, and I agree with you that the coaching is a big factor, and that's why you wonder if Kerr's, whatever his role may be in this, if that could even this series out a little bit, or is Mike Brown kind of grown as a coach?
Well, Mike Brown has grown. I think Mike Brown has done a great job knowing his talent, knowing what they can do. I go back to what I was talking about when there have been some times in this playoff run where the offense is bogged down, where they're not hitting their shots, and Mike Brown was smart to give the ball to Kevin Durant, run a two-man game at the top, and Durant is so good getting his shot, he's either going to score from the field or he's going to get to the free throw line, and that has been a huge difference. So far, Mike Brown has pushed the right buttons. Is he as good as Steve Kerr? Well, he hasn't coached a championship team. He hasn't coached a team to a championship. So we'll have to see how things play out. But it is a great dynamic to have Mike Brown going up against LeBron James, his former boss, in this series, right?
Mitch Lawrence, yes, it is. There's so many storylines. This is such a compelling series, as we know. It never happened before. Third series where the two teams have split the first two. So we get a true rubber match. But what's the gap to say that this wouldn't happen again? What's the gap in the West from the second team to the Warriors? What's the gap in the East from the second team to the Warriors, to the Cavs?
Well, what you've seen in the East is LeBron, he and the Cavs are on their own level. We've talked about this in the past, and boy, it obviously killed Boston to lose Isaiah Thomas, although they won a game without him. There just aren't enough stars on these teams in the East. You have regular season stars, don't get me wrong, John Wall, and you've got guys like DeRozan and Lowry and Isaiah Thomas. But in terms of what their production is like in the heat of a playoff series and how they match up with LeBron, LeBron doesn't have an equal in the East. So you're right, he could go as long as he stays in Cleveland and Kyrie Irving's there and Kevin Love. They could continue to march to the finals. I mean, look at LeBron's record against the rest of the East now. What's it, like 36-5 against the East since he came back? That is an incredible, astounding record, but it makes a world of sense when you look at the competition. And out West, I mean, that's what we knew. When Durant left Oklahoma City, it did two things. It made Golden State a super team, and it eliminated a championship contender, because you got to remember, last year in the conference finals out West, Durant and Westbrook together were 5-6 minutes from going to a finals and beating a 73-win team on their home court. And Klay Thompson bailed Golden State out with 11 threes. And then, down the stretch, Durant and Westbrook destructed. They killed themselves with turnovers and bad shots. They lost an awful game, an epic collapse. They would have gone to the finals. So by Durant leaving, that killed off Oklahoma City as a viable contender. It's really, to me, a two-horse race. It's going to be that way for the next couple of years. I don't think San Antonio's going to gain any ground. They got Tony Parker, who's probably going to have to retire off that injury. Kawhi Leonard will be back. What you saw with LaMarcus Aldridge is all about. He doesn't want the big pressure to hit him. So, no, I think that you're right. I think this is a finals we could see another couple of years, no doubt.
Yeah, and, we were discussing in the first hour before you came on, Mitch, about our teams in the East building that way, building with the notion of, okay, we have 2 years or 3 years to put a team together because we know next year and maybe the year after we're just not going to be ready.
Here's the easiest way to answer that. If Danny Ainge doesn't make a move for Paul George or Jimmy Butler, Gordon Hayward may be different, but let's say he doesn't make a move for a guy like that, then you know that Boston's still going to play the long game. They're still going to be content to wait LeBron James out. Who knows? Maybe LeBron James in the next couple of years is going to start slowing down. I mean, the frustrating thing, the thing that has to have Boston kind of like being, like not in shock, but a little bit of dismay, is that LeBron doesn't show, except for that one Game 3 episode. He might have been sick. Who knows? He shows no signs of slowing down. He shows no signs of letting anybody approach him on the court. But if Danny Ainge, I mean, that's a key thing to look at. The teams that are building like Philly, the teams that are building in the East around young guys, they just have to go about their business that way and not try to make big-time, let's make a move for a big-time free agent, a guy who's established, because if you're going to go up against, Cleveland, you're going to lose. This is where Toronto's probably in worse shape of anybody in terms of the East, in terms of contenders. They can't get by Cleveland. I don't think they have that belief. And they've got guys in the primes of their careers who have to win now. That's a very difficult situation. It's just like what the Knicks faced against Jordan in the 90s, including, Knicks in Cleveland and some other teams too. You're just at the wrong time at the wrong spot.
Mitch, do you buy into the narrative? Because as Mike and I were talking about, you don't know when that decline of LeBron is going to come, when that's going to happen. Do you buy into the narrative at all that Cleveland was, hindsight's 20/20, but was Cleveland genius in letting off the gas pedal a little bit, resting their guys and saying, go ahead, Boston, you take the number 1 seed. We're happy in a 2 spot. We don't have to meet up with Washington, and here we go.
They played it smart. They're in a position as a championship team where they've won key road games, including 2 big road games last year, Game 5, Game 7 of the finals. They can win anywhere, anytime, as long as LeBron is healthy and his mind is right and he's focused. And so, for him, giving him resting 6-8 games as he did in the regular season, starting with game number 11 in Indiana in November, guys. That's when this rest thing started with him. They're going to do that next year too, and they're going to do that in the future as long as he's there. Because for them, they're not worried about finishing with the number 1 seed. It's more important for teams like Boston. It's more important for teams like Toronto and Washington, who aren't good road teams, especially when they have to go into Cleveland. More important for them to be the number 1 seed. For Cleveland, all it's about is, as Chuck Daly used to say, just land the plane, make a safe landing to start at the end of this regular season. Everybody's healthy, where you can start your climb for the playoffs there and go about your business. Because when you've won a championship, you got a guy like LeBron who's 32 and in the league 14 years. You have different special considerations versus these other teams.
Mitch Lawrence, Sirius XM NBA Radio, Forbes, Sporting News, NBA writer. So if you're a free agent, are you choosing to go to a Western Conference team to try to get through the Warriors, or an Eastern Conference team and end LeBron's reign this summer?
Well, Gordon Hayward's in that position this year, right? I mean, he's a guy who is in Utah, and people have linked him to Boston. And Boston, as people have reported, he's number 1 on their list, and Brad Stevens is there because he coached him and Butler. I'm sure that's a consideration for Gordon Butler. I mean, look, in the second round, they had to play Golden State, right? And he saw what he was up against. He knows for the future How are they going to get past Golden State? Oh, by the way, the Spurs aren't going anywhere. They're going to be a force. Houston had a great year. Ended up, it was miserable for James Harden late, but they're another factor. Yeah, if you're Gordon Hayward, you might say, you know what, I could go to the East, and at least I'll get maybe to the conference finals like Boston did without him this year. And you're still going to have to get by Cleveland, but you can make a deeper playoff run. But it also comes down to money, guys. Let's not forget that. That's a huge consideration. Utah's going to show him a tremendous contract. Now, he didn't make the All-NBA team, and there were other guidelines where if he could have made different levels, he could get a huge super contract, a super max, over $200 million. So that keeps the control that Utah has over him less because now the money difference between Boston and Utah will be lesser for him. But, it all depends on the individual. Some guys look at money more. Some guys look at their ability to win. Some guys like Kevin Durant look at, I've been here in Oklahoma City for whatever reason. I can't get by these other teams. Let me go join a super team. But those teams don't have a lot of roster spots for other players.
That's what I was saying. Those teams are full. So it's like, what's the next team that's attractive, that maybe needs that missing piece, that if they get the piece, can be the rival to the Cavs and the Warriors, like Houston or Washington, San Antonio?
Well, you know what? People are thinking, I've reported, and I think other people have too, that it looks like Chris Paul's already got a deal in place with the Clippers. But his name keeps coming up for the Spurs.
Right.
Maybe that's just a little leverage play on his part. But you know what? Would you take a Chris Paul if you're San Antonio with Tony Parker, who would probably have to retire with the same injury that drove Barkley out of the sport and also Dikembe Mutombo? You may. I mean, that might be a thing where he had to look at that seriously. That's obviously, to me, the third team. I'm not buying Washington yet. They had a disappointing ending. The fact they couldn't get by Boston, who was very beatable and got basically beat by Kelly Olynyk in a Game 7, that was kind of a disaster in the way it played out for John Wall in Game 7. So I'm not totally buying them yet. Toronto's got big issues, big problems, because they've got this team that they feel is ready-made, and they couldn't even deal with Cleveland, and Lowry got hurt. I don't know who there is in the East. I don't know I think you still have to go with Boston because they did win 53 games. They're well coached. They could add a piece or two. But right now, there's nobody to me that's the automatic, yes, if this player gets X, then they're going to make that quantum leap. Because the other two teams are still so far ahead of everybody.
I agree. Like the Washington thing's interesting. Like they got John Wall, who I really like, and Beal had a nice game there. But I just don't know how. Like I don't know that they're attractive in free agency. I don't think that they don't have a first round pick. I see that team just kind of hitting the ceiling there a little bit. But there's always that little engine behind them, that Embiid-Simmons duo. Well, don't forget about them.
Well, I haven't forgotten about them. What we need to see is Embiid stay healthy and get on the court for more than 31 games. We need to see him be on the court for 81 games.
That's right.
And we need to see what Ben Simmons is all about. I mean, it's great. All these, great plans involving the Sixers, and, we got a little taste of Embiid, and it's great. He looked phenomenal. He looked like a real game changer, a landscape changer. But until these guys can get on the court, you know what, then you really can't take them seriously. So what do they say? Your best ability is your availability. That's the big problem in Philadelphia. They're going to add a tremendous piece at 3, whether it's Jason Tatum or somebody else. They definitely need a shooter. So I think, in the back of everybody's minds, coaching-wise and executives in the East, they look at Philadelphia and they say, there's a team, but they also say, yeah, these guys have a lot to prove because they just have to get on the court and stay healthy. Those are big considerations.
Hey, I was surprised that Colangelo was on last week and said we'll have 2 healthy guys to start the season, definitively. 2 healthy guys, Joel Embiid and Ben
That's what he
Simmons.
hopes. That's what he hopes. He doesn't know that for sure. You never know what's going to happen. So, you know what? If they're going to hold these guys out for the summer in hopes of just getting them healthy for preseason,
that's the
good
plan.
For them. Let's see it. We have to see the key here in the East, guys, is we have to see somebody else start to step up in the East because you can't take Boston seriously as a contender. They just don't have the star power. You can't take Toronto. They've had their time, like Indiana did a few years ago against Miami. Washington, they got to re-sign Otto Porter. They still have some holes to fill up front. I don't know if they can do that even with the great John Wall. So, yeah, maybe it would be a great thing for Philadelphia to have these guys stay healthy because then you might see the rise of a team for the future in the East. We certainly need that in the East. Otherwise, just get used to seeing Cleveland in June all the time.
He's Mitch Lawrence, everybody, and we always enjoy his insight at Mitch_Lawrence is where you can get his NBA columns from Forbes and the sporting news. And if you have Sirius XM, check out NBA Radio. You'll hear Mitch on there all the time doing NBA postgame and getting ready for the NBA Finals, which, Mitch, we will catch up with you for those finals on the way.
Appreciate me having me on, guys, and enjoy your holiday weekend. All right?